Illinois had not signed the appointment,
Right.
and without that, it wasn't legitimate. Turns out, as the Senate runs itself, and the Senate has its own rules,
Yeah, they have their
and
own
the
rules.
Senate has control of who it seats. If you had the Secretary of State of every state deciding who was going to be put in to a vacant seat at the U.S. Senate, and each Secretary of State had to sign off, you're telling the country that the Secretary of States basically have seating power for the U.S. Senate. Well, the Senate's not going to stand for that. And so I think Rolland Burris will probably be seated this week, and maybe even Al Franken will be seated this week. You just don't know, but that's another seat that's up for...
How do you explain that? On election night, Coleman, the current senator, was ahead by 400 votes, and now he's trailing by 200 or 300, depending on the latest.
225 or thereabouts.
And it's been counted at least twice.
Right, and there's no telling. You
think there's anything funny going on?
Well, that's why Coleman's people filed another suit. They want to look at some votes that they think were either not counted and others that were counted twice. So we'll have to see how far this goes. But the feeling is that Franken's going to be seated.
I think he's already been certified by one group.
Right, he has, right. And so there may the fight may go on after the seating. And if they find something was irregular, they'll have to redo it and take him out, I guess. Of the
Stuart
seat.
Smalley to the Senate. That's a pretty good job.
It is. But you've had out of that. Don't forget what that state's given you. That state's given you Jesse Ventura.
Jesse Ventura's governor.
There've been a couple of real prizes that came out of Minnesota. So
you wouldn't think so. You think of a nice, calm Midwestern state, but they've had some interesting political people.
They have.
Going all the way back to Humphrey, who was very good, not to put him in the
he was
category
fine.
of Ventura,
Mondale was
but
fine.
characters.
They had a governor at one time for the open Senate seat appointed himself.
Yeah.
And so he went to Washington, and Senator Anderson, I think it was, and when he ran for the full term, the voters defeated him.
Yeah.
So he was out as governor and senator.
Yeah.
So that state is just a little, the cold weather gets you.
I guess they
something happens
on the brain sometimes.
Yeah.
But, speaking of another Senate seat open, the one in New York, and again, since we talked last time, Caroline Kennedy has campaigned hard, at least to the current sitting governor, Patterson, who wants to be appointed.
Right, and along with Mario Cuomo's son and some others.
Fran Drescher, I believe, would like to have it.
Right, there are several who want it. I think that the governor is going to have to make that appointment probably sometime this week, would be my guess. I mean, here you have Hillary is still the senator, but she's going to be sworn in here shortly. We have to give that up. I noticed Joe Biden got sworn in yesterday as a senator, took the oath as Senate, for a senator from Delaware, but he will give that up once Inauguration Day comes. His appointment has already been put in place, and is going to stay there probably with an agreement to stay the 2 years before the next general election, and by that time Biden's son will be home from Iraq and can run for his dad's Senate seat.
Is that right?
That's the plan.
That's interesting. I didn't know his son.
That's the plan.
I know his son was over in Iraq.
That's the plan. They're saving it for both.
Yeah. Do you think Caroline Kennedy has a chance to be named?
I do. I think it's going to be hard for Patterson not to name her. Yeah, I think there's been a lot of
name recognition alone.
Name recognition alone. There's been a lot of pressure. There's been pressure, of course, not to appoint her because she has no experience and such. But I think Patterson's going to be in a tough position not to appoint her. It's almost like turning over a ruling on an NFL play. If you don't have the evidence to show that it didn't happen, if you just have the film that says, well, it looks like it might have, we don't have definite film, we can't overturn it.
Right.
I think he probably can't prove that she's not worthy of that seat.
And to be honest, I mean, if you're going to be named to a political seat, Senate is one where I guess your staff can almost carry you through for a while till you learn it.
Well, you can, and she's got her uncle there, and she's got her cousin there, in the house.
Yeah.
She's got some relatives around who would help her. But I mean, the way I think it should go, there was a story not long ago that said either Bill Clinton should be appointed to that seat, or Mario Cuomo, the former governor of New York, with the understanding they stay there for 2 years. Give them a little, gravitas to the seat, give them some notoriety, which that state has always had in those seats, with Moynihan and Kennedy and the others. And then after that 2-year term is up for the filling of the last 2 years of the regular seat or the regular term, everybody who wants to run. then you just have an open seat in 2010, and away you go. And let Caroline and Cuomo and whoever else wants the thing run then. That's the way I think it should be. Maybe not Cuomo, maybe not Clinton, but somebody else who could fill that seat with the understanding they won't run again in 2010, who's got a little bit of political stature.
I don't know why they can't have a, say, 90-day window to have an election now.
They could, but I think with the problems that states are having budget-wise, it takes a lot of money to put on an election, and I think then to have to do it again in 2 years, I think the appointment process is fine, but I think they ought to, let everybody who wants to run 2 years from now.
Get the full election going. Just to wind up today, a movie that came out right around holiday time, Nixon Frost, about those interviews that were done back in, I believe, 1976.
Right.
And I know you haven't seen the movie yet. I haven't had a chance to see it over the holidays, but you worked with President Nixon, so you have more of an insight on kind of what happened then, didn't you?
Well, I didn't work with him then. I wasn't in Washington then. I was in Detroit, being the news editor of the paper. But, I did a lot of editing on stories when he was getting ready to resign. The editor of our paper, Martin Hayden, had been the bureau chief in Washington, was a good friend of Nixon's, and Nixon called him at the paper and asked him what he thought he should do.
Really?
Yeah, because the news, the Detroit News, was one of the papers, which was a sort of a conservative paper editorially, came out and said he should resign. And I think that was one of the sort of moving features in having him do that, because it wasn't just the enemies who were against him, it was his friends who were telling him, hey, you're hurting the country. I spent time with Nixon after that in a couple other jobs that I had, and he came and gave a speech at the Business Roundtable, the National Business Roundtable in New York at the Lynx Club. And he was, I'll tell you, the person who was his staffer told me, listen, the president doesn't want a podium. He's going to talk to about 40 CEOs, big company CEOs at this club in New York. She said that he doesn't want a podium. He's going to speak for about an hour with no notes, and he wanted no podium because he wanted to have them realize he was doing this out of his head.
Without notes.
Without notes. And so he didn't want any podium to make it look like he had something up there he was hiding. And he took them on a tour, geopolitically, militarily, of the whole world, with each country that was a focus of his speech. China, Russia, Pakistan, the Middle East, Africa, went through it in an hour and left these guys who are not used to being spellbound. Showed up without Secret Service. I met him at the corner of 74th and Broadway, walked him down to the rest of the club.
Himself?
Yeah, by himself. Walked down the club, rode up in the elevator with him, talked. He signed books. He had some books there. They signed books, and left. Walked him to the corner. His car was there waiting, and away he went. Yeah. It was sort of a surreal kind of setting. But I mean, the guy was brilliant, still in his grasp of world affairs.
I saw interviews not too long before he passed away when he got sick. He was, I guess, in the early 80s then. Still had a grasp of everything that was going on worldwide. I mean, a brilliant mind, unfortunately. The ego got in the way, and we all know what happened with Watergate.
Right.
But a brilliant guy.
Was. One of the smartest presidents probably we ever had.
Yeah. But recommendation for the movie, Frost Nixon. We have nothing to do with monetarily with it, but it is an excellent movie. But I just want to bring it up because Gary had worked with the president in his later years.
Right.
Right. Gary, always good to talk to you. We'll look forward to our next visit. I'm sure a lot more will happen between now and then.
We got a whole lot coming, that's for sure.
Gary Schuster joining us on Political Roundtable. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you again real soon.